parts of New York, Los Angeles, or even Las Vegas, and you'll notice something feels off.
Tourism in Las Vegas is in a big slump this summer, costing the city billions of dollars. Some are saying that could signal trouble ahead for the U.S. economy.
The crowds that used to spill out of restaurants and pack hotel lobbies just aren't there. Once bustling with foreign tour groups, they're now noticeably quieter.
Here in New York, tourism is also being hit big time, once again driven by negative sentiment toward the USA.
In neighborhoods built around international visitors, restaurants sit half empty, hotel lobbies are calmer than usual, and even casinos that thrived on overseas guests are seeing fewer high rollers. This isn't just lost tourism, it's lost income for thousands of workers. This isn't just a dip in tourism, it's a warning sign. So what drove visitors away, and why is it hitting America's economy harder than most people realize?
I've been to Vegas like probably 20 times, and I definitely think this is the slowest I've seen in a long time.
We were not expecting it to be that expensive. It's quite expensive.
In 2019, travelers from one East Asian market were a big part of America's tourism picture. They used to show up in the millions and spend a lot when they did. Official profiles put the average spend per visitor before the pandemic at roughly $4,000 to $5,000 a trip, which made that market especially valuable to places like Hawaii, Las Vegas, and major shopping outlets. Fast forward to the post-pandemic bounce back, and that same market has not fully returned to pre-2019 levels. In 2023, U.S. arrivals from that market were reported around the low millions, roughly 70% of 2019 volumes in some gateway stats, and regional hubs such as Hawaii registered clear gaps in group bookings. So what does that actually look like on the ground? Fewer charter flights, smaller tour groups, shops that used to sell out of cosmetics now carrying normal inventory, and restaurants missing the 40-seat rushes they used to plan for. Those empty seats are not abstract numbers. They translate into fewer shifts and lighter tips for local workers. Ready to see what pushed visitors away and rattled trust? One of the biggest shocks came from something far outside tourism brochures. In 2023, U.S. immigration agents carried out a large enforcement raid at a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia. Hundreds of South Korean workers were suddenly detained, and the news spread back home within hours. Imagine being a family planning a vacation. You start seeing headlines about your fellow citizens being treated like criminals at a high-profile U.S. factory. That sort of image does more damage than any travel advisory.
Surveys in South Korea afterward showed a sharp dip in trust. In fact, nearly 6 in 10 respondents said they were disappointed in how the U.S. handled the situation. And disappointment in this case doesn't just stay in the abstract. It changes behavior. Families rethink hotel bookings, students cancel language study trips, and group tour operators quietly move clients to Japan or Europe where they feel more welcome. So while the U.S. might have seen this as an immigration matter, to everyday people abroad, it looked like a signal. Maybe you won't be treated well here. And when trust wavers, it doesn't take long for the numbers to reflect that. Which brings us to the hard data behind these losses. One of the turning points wasn't about travel at all, but about headlines. In 2023, immigration officers raided a Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia and detained a large group of South Korean workers. For people back home, the images were unsettling. Not factory news, but a story of their citizens suddenly in handcuffs on U.S. soil. Now think about it from a traveler's point of view. If you're planning a family holiday and the country you're flying to is all over the news for detaining your compatriots, do you still feel comfortable booking? That unease showed up quickly. Polling in South Korea found nearly 60% of respondents felt let down by how the situation was handled. And when disappointment takes hold, it changes real choices. Students switch language study programs to Canada. Families choose Tokyo Disneyland over Florida. And tour groups redirect their bookings to Paris or Singapore. So while the U.S. authorities may have seen it as an enforcement matter, abroad it read as something else entirely, a warning. And once that warning takes root, the effects start showing in the numbers: how much visitors spend, how often they come, and whether they come at all. Let's peek at what the numbers look like now, not from years ago, but from this year and recent forecasts. Right now, inbound travel to the U.S. is weaker than many had hoped. Experts now expect an 8.2% drop in international overnight arrivals for 2025, with travel sentiment and global policy concerns dragging things down. Oxford Economics. And according to a study from Tourism Economics, total inbound spending is projected to fall by about 4.2%, which translates to around $8.3 billion in lost visitor spending this year. One spotlight case, in February 2025, international visitors spent nearly $21.8 billion in the U.S. on lodging, dining, local transport and recreation, and more, which was up about 4% over February 2024. But this number hides the unevenness. Airfare receipts fell by about 3%, U.S. Department of Commerce. And behind those national sums lie painful local gaps. Destinations that once counted on large group bookings are feeling the pinch. Fewer charter flights, half-empty hotel blocks, and shopping volumes down on last year. When some of your highest-spending tourists pull back, the losses aren't linear, they bite hard. Now, you might wonder, how do those financial contractions show up in everyday life? Next, we'll walk through the ripple effects on Main Street. And this is where the numbers stop feeling like charts and start hitting real people. Think about what happens when a large tour group cancels. That's not just a plain seat left empty, it's dozens of hotel rooms sitting vacant, restaurant kitchens prepping less food, and taxi drivers waiting longer between fares. In Hawaii, tourism boards have already noted how group arrivals are uneven compared to 2019, leaving hotels and airlines scrambling to adjust schedules. In Los Angeles, Korean-owned eateries that once relied on tour buses pulling up at dinner time say their tables are now filled mostly by locals, not big-spending travelers. Even small shifts add up fast. One hotel block of 40 unused rooms can wipe out an entire week's income for the housekeepers and front desk staff who depend on consistent occupancy. A missed group dinner in Las Vegas might sound minor until you realize that a single group can order hundreds of meals in one night. Multiply that loss across outlets, drivers, and shops, and the so-called multiplier effect turns abstract numbers into lower paychecks and shorter shifts. So the question is, why are these everyday businesses bearing the brunt, and what role do policies like visas play in this drop? A big piece of the puzzle comes down to visas and the layers of red tape that surround them. Before the pandemic, South Korean travelers had it pretty easy under the ESTA program, which let them apply online for short visits. But since then, the experience has changed. Processing times are longer, security checks stricter, and the costs are climbing. In 2024, the U.S. government introduced a new $250 visa integrity fee for some applicants, on top of existing charges. That came right after ESTA itself rose to $21 per application, double what it was just a few years ago. Now, if you're a family of 4 budgeting for a vacation, these fees add up before you even book the flight. And for group operators, the kind that move dozens of tourists at once, those extra charges make destinations like Japan, Canada, or France far more appealing. Their entry requirements are simpler, cheaper, and often processed in days, not weeks. And that's the hidden cost. It's not just about paperwork, it's about perception. If visiting feels like a hassle, people quietly shift their plans elsewhere, which explains why we're seeing other countries benefit from travelers America used to count on.
So, where are these travelers going instead? The answer is pretty clear if you look at flight data and tourism board reports. Japan has become one of the biggest winners. Korean visitor numbers to Tokyo and Osaka rebounded sharply after pandemic restrictions lifted, with Japan welcoming over 2.3 million South Koreans in just the first half of 2024, making it their largest inbound market. Shorter flights, cheaper fares, and no visa headaches make the choice obvious. It's not just Japan. Canada is also scooping up demand, with Toronto and Vancouver reporting rising arrivals from Asia, especially among younger travelers choosing study programs and family trips there over the U.S. Meanwhile, Singapore and Dubai are pitching themselves as seamless stopover destinations with slick airports and straightforward entry processes. Europe, too, has benefited. Paris, Rome, and London continue to attract travelers who once saw New York or Los Angeles as their dream stops. The pattern is consistent. Travelers are voting with their feet, heading where the welcome is warmer and the entry process is lighter. And once habits shift, it takes serious effort to win them back, especially when other markets keep raising the bar. And here's the part that should really set off alarm bells. It isn't just one market drifting away. South Korea might be the most visible right now, but other growth markets are showing the same signs of hesitation. Inbound demand from India, Brazil, and Mexico has slowed compared to early forecasts. And analysts now expect overall international visitor spending in the U.S. to drop by about 4.2% in 2025, which equals more than $8 billion less flowing into local economies this year. Tourism Economics even warns of an 8% decline in overnight arrivals, meaning fewer guests across hotels, restaurants, and attractions nationwide. That matters because these markets aren't fringe. They were supposed to drive the next phase of recovery. India's outbound travel is booming, with record numbers of Indians flying abroad in 2024, yet the U.S. isn't capturing its fair share. Instead, London, Dubai, and Singapore are pulling ahead. And in Latin America, middle-class families are opting for Spain and Portugal over Orlando or Los Angeles, citing smoother visa approvals and more predictable costs. If these trends spread across multiple countries at once, it won't just be certain neighborhoods noticing. The shortfall could hit across the entire U.S. travel industry. You really see the impact when you listen to the people working closest to visitors. In Koreatown, Los Angeles, restaurant owners say the big dinner rush that once came from packed tour buses just isn't there anymore. Tables still fill, but mostly with locals. And the difference in spending is obvious. Tourists order more, tip more, and come in larger groups. In Honolulu, hotel managers track charter flights like weather forecasts. And when a flight from Seoul gets canceled, it isn't just a few empty rooms, it can be dozens of housekeeping shifts cut for the week. Taxi and Uber drivers in places like New York and Las Vegas tell a similar story. Fewer international fares mean longer waits at airports, and when those fares do come, they're often shorter rides. Retail staff at outlet malls in California say the days of customers rolling in with suitcases just to load up on cosmetics or sneakers are becoming rarer. These aren't abstract economics, they're everyday paychecks and tips disappearing in plain sight. And the more these stories pile up, the clearer the bigger picture becomes. Unless something changes, whole communities tied to tourism will keep feeling the pinch. So what happens if nothing changes? The worst-case scenario is simple. Images of raids, higher visa fees, and tougher rules spread, more travelers quietly cross America off their lists, and billions in spending vanish. But a more realistic path is still on the table. With smarter visa policies, quicker processing, and real welcome campaigns, arrivals could stabilize within a year or two, giving restaurants, hotels, and workers a lifeline. The real question is, do you think the U.S. will act fast enough to bring tourists back? Share your take below, and don't forget to subscribe for more.